Just another Saturday. Just another Saturday.
So I played this, or I made this little short video, and I'm worried that people are going to misunderstand me because I use a lot of sarcasm. For those who don't know me or are new to the channel, I made a video called Despicable OSAS. Let me clarify my heart on the issue. I'll play it, part of it anyway. So I don't want to be uncleared for people that may be new to my channel. So let's see. I realize this happens all the time and people misunderstand me, so I want to be careful. And yes, I like plants, I like succulents. Okay. Look, man, you can't obey Jesus. You can't do it. It's impossible. You have to work on the Sabbath. Anybody who says you should have to take the Sabbath off is a works-based salvationist. You got to work on the Sabbath, so you're not works-based. So I'm doing what I think actually Paul does in the New Testament. I'm not doing it because of that. I just something I studied recently called, in the scholarship, they call it like slogans. In other words, there's parts in Paul where, maybe some denominations think he's literally teaching it, but a careful look shows that, or a careful study of it, and it, I'm not looking to make a case for any particular part of this, but it's certainly, I think I can say accurately that anyone, whatever denominational background you have, whatever you believe, in other words, I think there's no way to take all the New Testament or all of Paul's writings without thinking there's at least one slogan or two in there, because otherwise, if you took it all as him teaching it, you would be in contradiction to himself. For instance, one I think is a slogan, okay, when he says all things are lawful. And then I've had a video on this, so you can look for it if you want to, and I'll explain. You can see the explanation there, but he's not saying that you can do whatever you want, because that's what he's teaching people who think it's okay to do whatever you want. And he's saying, no, he literally, after he says that, and then it gives them an explanation, he's correcting them on their sexual immorality, which is one of the things listed in Acts 15, which people refer to say, this is all we have to do as Gentiles. See, the law isn't, it's like, see, we don't do any of the Old Testament law. And then they point to Acts, and it's like, he literally quotes some of the Old Testament law and says, you must do this. Now there's different, I'm not going to get into interpretations of that, but it certainly can appeal to the verse where he quotes laws from the Old Testament that they must do right away, that the people coming into the church from Corinth, and then tell me that there's nothing the same from the Old Covenant, because he's literally quoting the Old Covenant and applying it to Gentiles. So that doesn't prove that the whole law or whatever. I'm just saying you can't say it's entirely different in every aspect. So, and then appeal to a verse that proves my interpretation. Okay, so, but let's see, I'm losing my place here. So yeah, there's these slogans, right? All things are lawful. That's an example. I'll get back on track in a second here, but this is kind of when I'm talking there and saying you can't keep the Sabbath. I don't think you can't keep the Sabbath. Of course you can keep the Sabbath. It's one of the easiest commandments to do. You rest in Jesus on the Sabbath because it's holy, and God declared it such. So, I was thinking about this the other day. Did you know not even God himself could change that, because God can't lie. And it's a fact that he declared the Sabbath holy on the first seventh day by his presence. Therefore, the Sabbath is holy, set apart because of what he did. Can God change the past? Well, if he can, then that would be lying, because it would be like, I know I didn't create the world in 7 days and rest on the seventh day. Like, he could do it, but then he would be lying. I mean, maybe there's some way he could unholy the day that he made holy, I guess. I'm not saying that's impossible, but in a sense, you could almost make that case. That's neither here nor there, I suppose. But my point is this: that's how permanent it is. And then you talk on top of that, Protestants or Catholics or Orthodox, until the last 100 years, all their writings, if you read them and you see the way they talk, everyone understood the 10 Commandments, defined sin, not merely the 10 Commandments, but at least that. And all along through church history, whether Catholic or Protestant, like, someone tried to say otherwise, they were the minority. And now today, people are in these denominations and their derivatives, and they're saying, oh no, see, we're going to take Paul's writings here, take it out of context, and make it so that what Paul said here is an absolute contradiction with what he said over here, and then muddy the waters and then say, no, there's no law anymore. That's like that's a really basic error. Some people do it intentionally or don't care. Other people do it as a misunderstanding. I mean, that's my position. I have to, because I don't declare everyone that disagrees with me not a Christian. Everybody's somewhere in their journey. But the point of this video, which I'm not going to play anymore, I think you can see it, listen if you want. It's very short. But the point is, the glaring thing about once saved, always saved people for me, they can't keep the Sabbath. I'm a workspace heretic because I think you should not work on the day God said is holy. And New Testament is, why do you guys care about the Trinity so much, but you don't keep the Sabbath? Like, you want to be like the Catholics who burn people at the stake for not believing in the. Most people in your church don't understand the Trinity. Do you think they're not saved? I think you should believe in the Trinity. I think it's really important. I don't think people who don't believe in the Trinity can't be saved. Although I think it's a nuanced issue, right? Like, no single doctrine saves you per se, but doctrine matters. Jesus saves people. It's like a trope, right? But it's true. It just depends on how you're trying to use that claim. I like to say people aren't saved by doctrine, but a bunch of false doctrine could make a bunch of non-saved people think that they are saved, or make unconverted people think that to be converted is to be a works-based salvationist. And I have the whole, it's like this amazing fog. It's just like this amazing fulfillment of biblical prophecy that people say what they say to me about being works-based or something. And then and then they say my cult. And it's like, I read church history, and yes, Adventists have varying beliefs that people didn't have, but like the foundational stuff. Can you lose your salvation? Obviously, yes. Although there's much to be said on that issue. I'm not condemning everybody who disagrees with me here, but Adventists have so much more in common with even just every Protestant denomination regarding like the operation of what we do in this life as Christians and the call. And it's like, by the way, do you really think about your own church members and their varying degrees of understanding theology? Do you really think they're not saved if they can't articulate the Trinity properly? Do you really think they understand theology like you do, if you understand it much? I was like, you got to keep that in check. Like, and I'm not trying to downplay the importance of doctrine. The point is, people are hypocrites, and it's especially glaring when you're condemning people all the time. Now, it's a nuanced thing too, because doctrine does matter. But I'm all over the place here. I was just going to say this about the gay thing. I think homosexuality is a sin, and that people who are growing in their relationship with God would be turning away from it, okay? But everybody's going to be judged according to the light that they have. So I'm an advocate that homosexuality is a sin, but I'm disgusted by the hypocrisy, particularly in the OSAS camp. They'll tell you all day you can't keep the commandments, that I'm works-based because I take the Sabbath off. And then they'll say stuff like they like totally deny that the Spirit of God is given to believers to empower you to grow it towards the image of the Son, to obey God. And then they take the simplest commandment and say it's impossible. And then they try to curse you and tell you why you're not keeping it and da 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 da. And it's hypocrisy. It's disgusting, because I'm saved, don't you know? Because I said the magic words. And then they tell me I'm workspace because I think we ought to, like, say, rest on the Sabbath to honor the Creator who made the Sabbath for us and is the Lord of the Sabbath. And we will be keeping Sabbath in heaven. And the New Testament believers were keeping Sabbath after the cross, and nobody taught it not against it. And Jesus said in Matthew 24, pray your day that you don't have to flee on the Sabbath day, which is at least 40 years after the cross into the new covenant period, if not, and also the end times. And we said to keep it Gentile and non-Gentile in heaven, or the eternal estate, let's say. But okay, fine. I'm workspace because I think we have to keep all 10 of the commandments. Okay, so I think you're delusional if you think that. I'm workspace because, and then you turn around when you're talking to believers, you call people like me workspace, and then because you can't keep the commandments, and especially the Sabbath, which is like the simplest blessing you can do, but then, oh, wait a minute, you forgot what you say about gay people. Some of you guys say they're reprobates, like they're evil, like as if there is no literature on the psychology and the physiology and of genetics and things that aren't totally understood. And I'm not classifying everybody in any category. I'm just saying there's all kinds of evidence that it's not so simple, that they're just evil demons. They're just unsaved devils, like Jack Smack would say. You know, I'm not even going to say that guy's not saved. I think he's like doing a lot of bad teaching, and he's condemning, and he doesn't seem to have this fruit of the Spirit. But I'm not even going to say he's not saved. If you have to defend your doctrine that's so unhistorical amongst the majority of Christians, and you have to twist Bible verses and ignore other ones, and then call everybody that doesn't agree with you unsaved, or they don't understand the gospel, it's probably an indicator that you're wrong. Just saying. Okay. And I'm not even condemning all of you guys. There's varying degrees of this doctrine. Okay. But, you know, if you hate Calvinism so much, by the way, that doctrine gets introduced pretty much through those who are Calvinists, or largely spread that way. And if you have to dismiss the entirety of all the people appointed by the apostles over all the churches and posit some sort of, I'm not going to name names, but like I heard somebody who I consider a friend who's a Baptist that I disagree with on this, obviously, say something like all the church fathers were Roman Catholic heretics. It's like, come on, dude, that's so unsustainable and ridiculous. These men were appointed by the apostles. They knew the apostles, and they're all in agreement. Many of them knew the apostles. And really, this idea that you can't lose your salvation doesn't even start to really come into the church until Augustine. And then he's the basis of Calvinistic doctrine. So you hate Calvinism, and then you take kind of a perverse view of perseverance of the saints. You twist it, and then you reject the basis of the interpretation that sustains it. You should, like I've always said, you should be kissing. I think free will Baptists who believe in once saved, always saved should polish the shoes of a Calvinist every time they run into one for free. And I think they should, send them Christmas cards every Christmas, and pay the jizya, because you owe everything on that doctrine, which you make the one ring to rule them all, the one doctrine to rule them all. Look, you are a hypocrite. If you're going to say the magic words and you're saved, and gay people, though, aren't saved, look, homosexuality is a sin, just like Sabbath keeping is a sin. You know why? Because sin is the transgression of the law. And the only law that is in the New Testament is the one referenced from the Old Covenant, because that is the law of God to them. And they reference it, and they're quoting it. They're not establishing a new one. These are recordings of narratives of different times after the new covenant comes into being in the epistles. You can't take the narrative of like Acts in their teachings at different times and in the first 100 years, and then say, oh yeah, see, this is you're like some sort of council reestablishing which parts of the law are the law. These aren't establishments of a new law. They are quoting the Old Testament law in its application. They're references, and they're references to the law of Moses. So that argument is ridiculous. It is the best one, though, to say, well, whatever the New Testament says is active in the. Oh, really? Is that how the canon works? They were establishing the new law. I mean, that is true in a sense. But if it says, if you've broken one, you've broken them all. Well, one what? All of what? He quotes 10 commandments, several of the 10 commandments in James. Yes, that means you need Christ's justification to be saved. But you know what else it means? It means if you've broken one, you've broken them all. And the all, and then he references 10 commandments and he quotes some of them. The all there is the 10. That means there's 10 commandments. So I hope your flight doesn't come on the Sabbath day. And I hope you start having some grace for homosexuals, especially if you're free grace. You should be feverishly defending homosexuals in the homosexual church, but you don't because you're a hypocrite. God have mercy on your soul. God bless.